Africa should even be the #1 to be on the UN Security Council. If they do not listen to the masses, what awaits them in the future is something that they cannot carry. First of all, I think we should congratulate and then salute Prime Minister Abiy from demonstrating leadership. We haven't heard the AU say anything with regard to the efforts of President Obasanjo.
Africa is the genesis of humanity. Ourselves, we will put boots on the ground, we will go in and defend Ethiopia. You know, the attack on Ethiopia is the attack on all the African people.
Connect Africa.
Hello, welcome to Connect Africa. So we have here today Dr. Benjamin Agnayagre and brother Kwame Gonza. They are no stranger here at Connect Africa. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mahlet.
Thank you.
Okay, so today let's start. Prime Minister, he's back from the front line, and he tweeted, he sent out this message that joining other African leaders to name actually President Ramaphosa in their call for, for Africa to have a seat in the United Nations Security Council. But what came to my mind is actually not only this, okay, President Ramaphosa is doing this tour in West Africa, and then before that, President Uhuru Kenyatta was in Southern Africa, and there is this kind of reviving this pan-africanism and standing for their right, calling for unity, to remove borders and all that talks. So is it true that, is there some kind of awakening by our leaders, and is that for good, or is it something that we have seen before and like it was never implemented, or is it just a lip service? What do you think? Let's start with Dr. Benjamin Agnayagre.
Well, thank you very much, and greetings to your listeners and those who have been patronizing Connect Africa. It's very important, and I think one of the reasons why all this is happening, because the outcry from the masses of Africa, the concerns raised by the people of Africa at the grassroots are beginning to tell on the faces of the African leaders. Before, civil society organizations were very quiet on the continent. The media was somehow very quiet and not talking with regard to the issues confronting the continent. Today, we are in a different epoch where the awareness is growing. People are beginning to be aware that, yes, there's the need for us to begin to determine our own destiny. And for that matter, African leaders are beginning to see that if they do not listen to the people, eventually it will affect their own positions during elections. Because with time, the Continental Union government issue, the African High Command issue, issues bordering on the welfare and the well-being of the African with regard to the Africa that we want, will become a very topical issue during an electioneering period. They are beginning to see that, hey, they must also begin to talk alongside with the people. All along, we've been very quiet. Civil society organization and African people have been very quiet, even with what happened at the AU in terms of the election of the chairperson of the African Union. You saw the concerns that were raised by the grassroots, by civil society organization opposing the unopposed nature of FACI, which was democratically wrong, which many of civil society organizations saw it as a forceful takeover of the political authority of the African Union, because everything was done to prevent people from contesting him. The outcry was great, and people saw it. People are no more blind to some of these things. You find out that from all sectors of production, from major stakeholders, name them, from the university lecturers, farmers, women, children, everybody is talking about the need for Africa to be protected, and that it boils down to leadership. You know, and so African leaders are beginning to become wise in the sense that they think that if they do not listen to the masses, what awaits them in the future is something that they cannot carry, they cannot bear. And so I'm not surprised that President Uhuru is talking about borderless Africa. I'm not surprised that President Cyril Ramaphosa is going around talking about the veto issue, the UN Security Council issue. I'm not surprised. And all these are signals to show that the African leaders are beginning to see the importance of a continental union government, which in itself will protect the sovereign states of all the continent. You know, so it's not surprising, but this is the start. Whether they are doing it just to let us see that they are also beginning to sing our along with us, or it is something to just, say, oh, let's do this, and later they go back and recoil. But we are watching. We are watching.
Perhaps, Brother Gonza, with that question, you may add also to address what can the CSO, the civil society organizations in Africa now carry, because usually there is a movement, there is a request, there is all those things, research and talking, but at the end, the decision makers are the leaders. Now that the leaders are talking about it, to bring this to an end, meaning into implementation, up to, you know, up to a request to the UN to have a permanent, what can they do? What can the CSO do? And then how do you view all those leaders now talking this? Should we take it a coincidence? I believe there's no coincidence, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mahlet. And thank you to your viewers of Connected Africa. I bring to you greetings from the Kwame Nkrumah Ideological Institute, which I present, and which is an organization that is all around our continent, Africa, and represents the interests of the African people all over the continent. This issue, I think it is not new, the issue of Africa advocating or pushing for a seat at the United Nations, at the United Nations Security Council. It is an issue that has been overdue for a very long time. Africa has been asking for this seat at the United Nations Security Council, and it has, the African voice has not been listened to for a very long time, even though these countries have been saying for a very long time that they are the the leaders and the carriers or the guardians of democracy. We find that the United Nations Security Council and the countries which sit on it, they were not elected democratically, but there is some sort of dictatorship, not just sort of, but there is a naked dictatorship at the United Nations Security Council. So you find that these countries attained a certain level of power and they apportioned themselves this kind of power whereby they can veto the affairs of the world, you know, the affairs affecting the world. They can decide on things regardless of their small populations. If you look at a country like France, for example, you know, very, you know, little population. It has a very small population compared to Africa with 1.4 billion people. Britain, all these countries, but they have so much power at the United Nations that Africa is disregarded. So it is an issue that has been long overdue. People like President Mugabe, they used to talk about this and advocate how Africa should have you know, a seat or should have 2 seats at the United Nations Security Council. But let us also not forget that power or respect is not merely something that is advocated for and earned from nowhere. When you look at the countries which are sitting on the United Nations Security Council, almost all these countries have nuclear weapons. They attained a certain level of military power, political power, and economic power before they were given this seat at the United Nations Security Council. Now, I think that while the African leaders should continue to push forward in advocating or in asking for this seat or in demanding for this seat so that Africa can be represented, so that it can also have veto powers, the same energy should be, you know, concentrated towards building a union government on the continent. Because before we have a political union as a continent, the rest of the world will not respect us. It is the same thing which Dr. Nkrumah said in the 50s and 60s, starting in the 40s. He said that seek ye first the political kingdom and all the other things shall be added unto you. And he went ahead to say in 1963 in Addis Ababa, and he said that it is the political, the African unity is a political kingdom, and all the other things like economic and social welfare of the continent and respect and all other things will come through the political project, the political union. So this is not a message which we should underestimate. Why we, the civil society, as Africans, Connect Africa, Kwame Nkrumah Ideological Institute, COSUA, you know, ADDI, all these organizations, PLO, Lumumba Foundation, all the organizations, you know, Pan-African Freedom Movement, United States of Africa, all why all of us we should support them, but we need to push them also in the direction of having a political union or building up a government of Africa, because before we have that, the whole world will not respect us. And this is where all the good things which we are looking for as Africans are going to come from. The security of the continent, like Dr. Benjamin spoke of the African High Command. These are the things which will be birthed from the political union. So you can see that the political union itself will give us mileage. You will be surprised that if we were able to form a political union tomorrow, a union of African states, a government of, you know, of African states, tomorrow a single government to represent all African, we recalled all our African ambassadors from the United Nations, all representatives. you would see that they would give us that seat immediately, because we have already attained a certain level of power and respect, which we would command immediately, even without firing a single shot, without even making a lot of noise. So I think that the same way that we as civil society are supporting them, the presidents, the heads of state of Africa, in advocating and pushing and demanding for a seat at the United Nations Security Council, it is in the same way, or even more, we should push them to demand for a united African government, because this is also an idea, even which came before this demand of a seat at the United Nations Security Council. The idea of a united Africa started long way in the 18th century. It was birthed in around 19th century by people like Marcus Garvey, and we started talking about this 60 years ago. We reached almost the climax of a union government in 1963 in Addis Ababa. So we almost formed this government. So this is an idea that has been around longer than even our advocating for and demanding for a seat at the United Nations Security Council. So while we should push in that direction, I think we need to also advocate and ask the leaders that they should give a serious consideration to this demand of the African people.
Interesting, yeah. And also when you talk about, Mugabe, what came to my mind is, ironically, those leaders who stand for their rights are labeled deliberately as dictator. They push you to be a dictator, and then they label you, they put you in a certain category. Yeah, that's interesting. On the other hand, now, this is African leaders. We have, there's a lot going on. What is going on in Ethiopia for 1 year, and then there's what's happening in Niger and Burkina Faso. There's Cameroon, there's Congo. What we are observing or from the African Union is a total silence, and even for the rest of the leaders. South Africa, President Ramaphosa is talking this because now what they have now termed as travel apartheid, that's what he's facing, and this is why he's talking about it. But for the whole year, we haven't seen, actually, not only in the African Union, but also the African leaders. It's only when something happens that they start to talk about this. So this silence is translated. I mean, people are observing. The African citizens are observing this. What do you comment on that, Dr. Agnayagre? What do we make of that as a citizen,
First of all, I think we should congratulate and then salute Prime Minister Abiy from demonstrating leadership, for showing that he is in to protect the sovereign status of Ethiopia, and that he's putting his life on the line by going to the battlefield to defend the land of Ethiopia. We are very proud of him. We salute him, and he's an exemplary leader. And we think this kind of leadership, the impetus, the energy, the wisdom in this kind of leadership is the type of leadership that we want in Africa, which eventually can bring the African people together. We are proud of him, and we are behind him, and we are ready to support him. Africa is behind him. Again, talking about the need for Africa to be to have a permanent seat at the UN Security Council. We know very well, looking at the demography, looking at the geography, looking at the history of Africa, like my brother Gonza earlier mentioned, Africa should even be the number one to be on the UN Security Council. We know that the 15-member of the UN Security Council, we have the 5 permanent with the veto, who can decide to veto any resolution of the UN Security Council, and who also have huge influence in determining who becomes the Secretary General of the United Nations. We think that Africa deserves it, and the leadership this time around, thinking that it is important, and therefore rallying around themselves to go in for it is important. I strongly believe that the fight, once they begin to push and push as a united voice, yes, Africa will be considered. And if Africa is considered, automatically, we should see Africa as one government. Because at the UN Security Council, the United States is one government. Yeah. China is one government. It is not provinces or regions or states. And so once they push for it and Africa is considered, automatically, we should see it as the first step of the Continental Union government in process. And we build from there and put all the structures in place. And I think the grassroots civil society organizations must continue to push, must continue to encourage our leaders not to be afraid. We are aware of the fear factor. And so no leader should be left behind. They should work in the collective to achieve what is right for Africa. We need equity at the UN Security Council. We need equity. What is happening now is not equity. What is happening now at the UN Security Council, denying Africa veto, is injustice. And so we think that it is time that we all support our leaders. What President Cyril Ramaphosa is doing, we encourage him. And to say that aside from what he's doing with his colleagues, they should also reflect and know that 2020 was declared the year of silencing the guns. And the year of silencing the guns must be seen being effective. If they come together and decide that, look, they don't want to hear any single gun shot in Africa, it can happen. It can happen. We have pockets of conflict all over the continent. Apart from this virus, apart from the mutating nature of this virus, whether the virus is skewed towards Africa with an intention, nobody knows, unless our scientists come out to tell us. The prediction was Africa was going to be littered in the streets with dead bodies. But it hasn't happened. We are still strong. And so it is time for us to think beyond our comfort level. The heads of states of Africa should think beyond their comfort levels and know that it is because of the masses that they are there. Without the people, there's no government. Without the people, there's no president. And so they also have a generation to protect. Africa is the only space for us. And so I think this is the way to go. it means that the civil society organizations' work is beginning to make some impact. And we only need to intensify our work. The media of Africa the media of Africa must intensify their work. We must identify, sell out media organizations or institutions and expose them to the people. The people shouldn't patronize them. They should rather patronize media groups that promotes continental union government, that promotes peaceful coexistence in Africa, that promotes the need to end wars in Africa, that promotes the Africa that we want.
Yeah.
And so civil society must step up alongside the progressive conscious African media, so that becomes an encouragement to the African leaders themselves for them to do more. Because when they turn and they see us pushing them, telling them what we want, and asking them to move, telling them to do what we want, then yes, they'll be encouraged to move. They'll know that the people are behind them. And they'll be able to overcome that fear factor. Because when one single person, leader, stands up to talk about African issue, he's targeted and possibly eliminated. But when they come in the collective and they begin to talk on the African issues and push, like what Prime Minister Abiy is doing to protect every single citizen of Ethiopia, that is what must be encouraged. Thank you.
Yeah, and then the same action was called as if he's a war man, a man of war. The Nobel Prize, the man who has a Nobel Prize now went to the front line as if he's a hostage of the Nobel Prize and sit and see while the security of his country and people is endangered, you know. Brother Gonza, let me come back to you. Would you like to comment on this one, like the silence of the African Union and also even the leaders? It's just because now they have a problem. They're talking about this union or the Security Council. What do we make of that as a civil society organization, as an ordinary citizen?
Yes, thank you, Mahlet. I would like to thank Dr. Agnayagre, who's just left the microphone right now. I would like to first comment on what you spoke about the issue of calling African leaders, those who stand up for what is right for the African people, dictators. You find that for a very long time, the Western world has had monopoly over narrative. And this is for some reasons, because they have had the control over the media, whereby they have been influencing the media all over the world. But as technology has advanced, now that narrative has changed, because now Africans and people in Asia and Latin America now have also got a way of voicing their side of the story. We can see today that the story of Africa is being, to a very larger extent, being told by Africans. You can see what happened recently with the issue of Ethiopia, that when they wanted to use some dubious means to attack Ethiopia, Africans have been able to come out on the continent and outside the continent to defend, you know, Ethiopia, because of the way and the position which Ethiopia occupies in the hearts of Africa, Africans around the world, not only on the continent, but around the world also. So it occupies a very special place, you know, in the minds of the African people. And also the fact that the African Union headquarters, which is like the capital of Africa, is located in Ethiopia. So this gives Ethiopia a very important position in the minds and hearts of all Africans. So that is where the concern came from. So for a very long time, they have had this control over the media, and to a very large extent that they have even misused this media in places like Iraq, where they have gone to attack Vietnam, Korea, Afghanistan, you know, and even recently here in Somalia, Libya, we have seen Syria. So they have used the media in a very reckless way, a very irresponsible way. And Africans have been watching. They have been watching for a very long time. So because these people have abused this power which they had accumulated, you know, for a very long time, we have also been learning, and we have been learning and have also mastered the script from which they have been reading. Like when you look at how they have been attacking countries, like the numerous countries which I've mentioned, Iraq, you know, all the way Afghanistan, Syria, even here when they came to Africa in Libya, they first come up with the media, and they'll put up a lot of propaganda, a lot trying to convince people's minds that this is the right thing to do for them to come and attack, and all of a sudden, you know, they send in military to you know to be able to attack militarily, physically, boots on the ground. But these are tactics which we have mastered due to certain reasons, like I said, advance in technology, whereby sort of technology, the rise of China has actually helped a lot. That technology itself has been democratized in a certain way. The media now, people can put up their own content, can develop their own content. At the same time, the African masses have grown in consciousness. The consciousness of the African people has been growing to a certain level that even when the AU was doing what it was doing, which the African civil society to a larger extent saw that it was not enough, regarding the issue of Ethiopia, when the United States and Europe and its partners were putting up a lot of propaganda to try to attack Ethiopia, the African people were able to come up and defend. They were able to voice out and speak up against this. All over the media, the movement is still going on. The No More movement, you know, Defend Ethiopia, you know, all these organizations, Kwame Nkrumah, they were able to come up and say, this is not acceptable. We will be able to defend Ethiopia in whatever way, whatever it takes, we'll be able to defend Ethiopia. So the African Union, in its silence regarding the issues that are affecting the continent, I think it needs to be pushed. It is good that we, as the African civil society and the Pan-African world, we have risen up also. I would encourage that the African people need to continue in that spirit to push forward and support the African leaders. Like we said, to a certain extent, African leaders have been fearful. They fear these countries because these countries are very powerful. Some of them, they want to stay in power. And so they, to a certain level, they relent, they fear to talk about things which are even affecting the continent. You see that Libya was attacked. A lot of African leaders just sat, you know, and looked and watched when things are happening. So to a larger extent, you see that they fear to voice out and protect their own people because of what will happen to them. Maybe they will remove them from power. Maybe they will come and attack the countries. But when we see that the African people now have started voicing up and they are able to protect, like what has happened in Ethiopia, I think that the African leaders also will step up. And if they would not step up, the African people definitely will push. We will push them.
What's probably unfolding in the region right now, is meaning in Eastern Africa or the greater Horn of Africa, is that the geopolitical shift in the region. Whenever America says something, also there's China and all America and its allies, and then China, there's Russia, there's, you know, and recently also while the Prime Minister while Blinken has been going around to talk about Ethiopia to the neighbor countries, and even as far as to the Western Africa to talk about Ethiopia, but China has come all the way to Ethiopia to talk about Ethiopia. So that by itself says something. So how do we view, you know, this China versus US in the region? There's definitely pros and cons, and also it relates to the Security Council. The issue of Ethiopia alone in the past 12 months have been brought up to the UN Security Council 12 times or even more. And if it wasn't for China and Russia, a lot has happened. I mean, we will not sit and talk this right now, and that's for fact. So how do you view that, Dr. Agnayagre, I think?
Well, you know very well that Africa is endowed with mineral resources. Africa is the richest continent in the world. Africa has been exploited for centuries upon centuries. Apart from that, Africa has suffered slavery, colonialism, neocolonialism, and still, they believe that without Africa, they cannot survive. And so they are all running to take full control over Africa through an advanced stage of an indirect rule, democratic systems. And so the battle is between the powers that be, you know, US and her allies, and China and Russia. And interestingly, there's one thing you must understand, you must look. Recently, I saw an envoy of China visiting the government of Ethiopia, you know, and I think it was in a way of to give them some support, or to say, hey, we are with you. And that was quite revealing. And that also could also give some kind of edge, you know, against the enemy. And so we ask ourselves, why will a Secretary of State be moving from one country to another, trying to convince the same Africans against their own? You know, these are issues that we must look at. Now, recently we heard the Eastern African community were going to hold a summit or a conference on Ethiopia. And unfortunately, we saw the attacks in Kampala. So why those attacks? And since then, we haven't heard the initiative with regard to the Ethiopian question by President Yoweri Museveni. And that was a good move, shifting his attention for him to look at internal security and not the sub-regional security. And so we should begin to look at that critically. But we think that President Yoweri Museveni should continue to call for that meeting.
Yes.
But it's very, very important. He should continue to call for that meeting. Now, the effort of President Obasanjo, when he even met the UN Security Council to explain the issues of Ethiopia and told that it was a political issue, and for that matter, it should be left with regard to finding a political answer to it. You know, since then, we haven't heard the AU say anything with regard to the efforts of President Obasanjo. We must hear from them. You know, what is going on? So it means that all the efforts within Africa itself against the undesired situation in Ethiopia is something that is being suppressed somehow. And so we must begin to look at all these things. That's why the other time we said, look, there was a need for an emergency head of states meeting with regard to the Ethiopian question, vis-a-vis all the other pockets of conflicts dotted all over the continent, because we want sustainable peace. We want the continent to be calm. So in terms of the geopolitics and all of that, we should also ask, where are the ammunitions coming from? Who is supplying all these rebels and all of that with arms? We know the regulations at the sovereign level, that each state, through official means, must acquire certain armaments, weapons to defend her sovereignty against external invasion and the rest, but not an illegal conduit to arm some people against the sovereignty of the country. And so we should begin to look at all these things critically, you know. And so for me, I think Ethiopia is winning. Ethiopia has won. Africa has won, because the crisscrossing of secretaries of states and the visiting of envoys from other countries to Ethiopia to sit with the government shows that, yes, victory is rest assured. You know, this is my contribution.
Gonza, I prefer you to address on the, you know, there is this rush that everybody wants something from Africa. I mean, kind of, they're busy. They try something on Ethiopia, it doesn't work. They go to the next level. They bring issues to their congressmen. They bring issues to the Security Council. They are trying really hard. And also the same with other regions and France also. And then also the people, you know, the powers on the other hand, Russia and China. What is going on? What do we make of that? How do you explain that?
Yeah, thank you, Mahlet, and thank you, Dr. Benjamin. I think this is the very reason why Africa is seeking a seat at the United Nations, a permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council. Is because for a very long time, the Western countries have held this belief that they can tell everyone what to do. They can determine everyone's political destiny all around the world. They can determine everyone's economic destiny. And the world has moved way beyond this, you know, this level of thinking. I think they are still stuck in a colonial mindset. We defeated colonialism long way, you know, long ago in the 1960s, but they have been sort of stuck in an old way of thinking. They think that we don't know what they are doing. They think that they are very smart, you know, they are smarter than us. And this is something which Africans have refused. So the trotting around, the hopping around the continent of for example, people like Blinken, Secretary of State Blinken, and coming to Kenya, going to Nigeria, going to Senegal, and his advances being rejected. This is evidence that people are really tired of the United States and its allies, the Europeans and whatever, Canada, you know, Australia, going about this, holding up this mindset of superiority before the world, you know, white supremacy and all this attitude is because the power has shifted. You know, we have seen explosion in Africa, in economies. When you look at, for example, Ethiopia, it's been the fastest, one of the fastest growing economies in Africa. So this explosion in economics on the continent and the explosion in economics and power in Asia has brought about this new consciousness. And the literacy rate, when you look at the continent, our continent itself, Africa, a literacy rate of around 70%. So you don't expect people to stay the same. You don't expect people to think the same. When you are talking about the youth alone, the youth of Africa now, the literacy rate, we are around, I think, more than 85% when we are talking about literacy rate. So these people, what they have not come to terms with is that the power, they have lost it. So they are continuing to hang on. You know, they are continuing to hang on this old mindset that they are still superpowers, that they know everything, that they can come and tell us what to do, even though we know that their countries are declining. You look at the United States, the economy is contracting. You look at France, the economy is contracting. Germany, you look at, you know, Brexit, you know, Britain is running out of the European Union. It's because of economics. They have a lot of problems. They have a lot of, you know, immigration problems. They have been destabilizing countries all over the world. And they thought that these problems of immigration from Middle East and North Africa, they will not come back to bite them. So now they are facing problems which they have provoked. And we are watching, we as African people have been watching. So they have been holding on to this mindset, which they are continuing to hold on, and which we have rejected and told them that this mindset, you cannot continue to hold on to it, because the world has changed. The United Nations should be a democratic institution because it represents all the citizens of the world. The people in the United States, individuals in the United States, they are no better than individuals in Somalia or any part of Africa or any part of Asia. These are all human beings. They have the same life. They have the same blood flowing through them. So we should not look at the world in an antiquated way, an old mindset. They are looking at the world in an old mindset. And yet the world has moved way beyond that level. Today, cultures are seeking to assert themselves. Nations are seeking to assert themselves. Africa has a lot of, you know, is rich in culture. Is the genesis of humanity. Africa is the genesis of humanity. This is where humans originated from. We have rich culture. So these cultures, they will continue to come out to assert themselves. African people will come out to assert themselves. You have seen how Afrobeats as a music genre has taken over. African fashion has taken over. So these cultures, consequently, they will come out to assert themselves. So it is up to the world, like what we see that the Chinese mission at the United Nations was able to recognize that Ethiopia has the wisdom, the African people have the wisdom to deal with this problem. So it is an internal problem. So it should be dealt with by the government. The government was elected to protect the people. And that is what Prime Minister Abiy, for example, is demonstrating. He's there to protect the people. President Uhuru Kenyatta has also made it very clear that the issue of Ethiopia should be settled from inside. Russia, the Russian mission at the United Nations also, they put out, you know, a statement, a tweet on their official account, and said the Ethiopia should be able to solve this problem by itself without interference. So someone will ask, why does the United States continue and its allies continue to go around the world, interfere in affairs of nations, Venezuela, Russia, everywhere, Cuba, you know? It is because of this superiority complex that they still hold, this white supremacy. And it is up to the world. I think we have, as African people, and it is good that African people, we have consistently come out and made it clear that we will not allow anyone to interfere in the issues in Ethiopia. We will come as African people, if it needs, ourselves, we will put boots on the ground, we will go in and defend Ethiopia, because we will not allow it. The attack on Ethiopia is the attack on all the African people, and it's unacceptable. So this is an attitude also we as a people, we need to continue to extend to all the other parts of Africa where France is disturbing all over West Africa and the Sahel. People in the Sahel are really tired of the incursions which France has been carrying out all over, you know, West Africa, North Africa. If they want to do business, let them come do business on you know, on equal terms, on a win-win terms, without this mentality of thinking that they are superior, so they should come and take away our resources, you know, at any time they want or on their own terms. I think this is an old mindset that has to be thrown out of the window. And the world, like I said, has progressed beyond this level of thinking. So I would advise them, I would advise countries in Europe, the United States, and their allies, that they have to start looking at the world in its reality. The power of the United States has reduced, you know, drastically. China has overtaken it economically when we are talking about a GDP in PPP terms. China has already overtaken the United States in economical. So they have to come to terms with this reality that the world has moved beyond the level of superiority, but we should be able to coexist as people. No one should be telling another one what to do, how to rule themselves, how to run their institutions. You know, this is how you should conduct your political affairs. We have moved way beyond that level because people have become smarter. People have become, you know, now the literacy rate of the people has increased. People are more intelligent now, so they know whatever is going on in the United States. The media has opened up, has been democratized. So no one now has monopoly over intelligence, over wisdom, over the media. We can make our own decisions, whether economically, politically. So this is how I see the world, and Africa itself has to continue to assert itself amidst all the challenges that have been you know, put in its way. Amidst all the challenges that have been put in our way of unifying, we have to continue to assert ourselves and unify our continent so that we can make it great, like how our forefathers, you know, envisioned for Africa to be as a great nation and as a civilization. I thank you very much.
No, thank you for that. Really, just a final question to throw. The Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed actually went to the front line when, you know, where there was a rumor that something has been plotted in Sudan, some kind of fake news is going to come up again to defame him. But he went totally to the other direction and he surprised them. Now he went and he came back. Many of the Amhara regions that has been occupied by TPLF have been captured by the government forces. And now today he returned to office saying that the first chapter of the ground mission, the battle, has been finished, meaning for him. And then he came back to continue some diplomacy work from office. And then that means there's chapter 2. But what I'm interested is, how is it seen? Nobody commented, to my knowledge, as per my reading, no African leader. I mean, that's where we are interested anyway, yeah, about Africa and how this is translated in other African countries. How do they view it? What does that tell us now, a leader going to the front line and, you know, doing this? Yeah, this is the final question. Dr. Agnayagre, perhaps, yeah, we start from you.
First of all, like earlier on, we all congratulated Prime Minister Abiy. We must roll back and look at the good work of Meles Zenawi. He set up a correct or a solid foundation, economic growth for Ethiopia. Mm-hmm. And he initiated the building of the Renaissance Dam. When the dam is completed, it is going to power industries. Prime Minister Abiy is building to sustain that. Now, you cannot achieve economic progress in the midst of war. And to give confidence to the people, he had to move to the battlefield And moving to the battlefield was a motivation to the troops. And now they have recaptured many of the areas that were taken over by the rebels. He has done what is right, what has to be done by a leader to stabilize the country and continue with the economic growth of the country. And I think that is awesome, because without that, the future of Ethiopia and Africa will become bleak. He has done something so great, which is equivalent to the fight against the Italian invasion of Ethiopia in so many centuries back. He has refused for Ethiopia to collapse on his head as a leader. And so he went to the battlefield, ready to give his life for Ethiopia to remain stable with an enviable and strong sovereign status.
Yes.
And so what he has done for me, I think African, Pan-African civil society organizations will have to come together and reward Prime Minister Abiy. An award from the soil of Africa will be more than a Nobel Peace Prize. And that will come from the African people ourselves. And that will be an honor to Haile Selassie. That will be to the founding fathers of Ethiopia. That will be the greatest honor to the founding fathers of Ethiopia, the founding fathers of the Organization of African Unity, the AU. That will be an honor to Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah, Amilcar Cabral, Frantz Fanon, Chris Hani, Winnie Mandela. That will be an honor to our heroes and our sheroes. We need to award Prime Minister Abiy. We need to award him so that he will become an example to many African leaders to know that African people are watching and we appreciate good leadership. Thank you.
Thank you indeed for that. Brother Gonza, you may add your view. Just before we come to you, I just, when the Prime Minister, this is exactly the same thing he said during his inaugurational speech in the Parliament when he came to power like 4 years ago. And then the same thing he said to the battleground. He said, when we live, we are Ethiopian. When we die, we are Ethiopia. Because basically we're going to be buried in her soil, and then that's it, that's the land of Ethiopia. So when he went to the battleground, what he said was, we have two options, either to be Ethiopian or Ethiopia. Yeah, let me just say that. Yeah, yes, Brother Gonza, you may add on that.
But thank you very much, Mahlet, and thank you, Dr. Agnayagre, for that articulation of what Prime Minister Abiy has done. It is great work. Just to go back a little bit on what you spoke about, and the question you raised, Mahlet, on the issue of other African countries. After the Prime Minister tweeted that he joined other African leaders in reiterating that a continent of around 1.3 billion people needs a permanent voice and seat at the United Nations Security Council, represented through a bloc. After he had tweeted that, he tweeted another one, and he said that Ethiopia continues to prioritize strengthening relations with our neighboring countries. I have had and held extensive phone discussions today with the leaders of Djibouti, Kenya, Uganda, Somalia, Eritrea, and South Sudan. We will continue working together on bilateral and regional issues. So to me, I think that the direction the Prime Minister took, and he has continued to take, is the right direction. When we go back to 2020, last year, when the war broke out, actually before the war broke out extensively, when there was a disagreement with Egypt, the prime minister, while Egypt went to, Egypt thought that it was the right thing for them to do, to go to the United Nations and involve at the United States and Europeans into the issues of the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam. We don't know what was the intention, whether it thought that is the best way to solve this issue. But the prime minister, while Egypt was at the United Nations and in New York, talking to President Trump, and President Trump was making his reckless remarks. The prime minister was in East Africa. He was visiting Uganda. From Uganda, he went to Rwanda. From Rwanda, he went to Kenya. You know, he spoke with the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo. You know, President Tshisekedi, and you can see that he has been making all the right moves as regards to the issue in Ethiopia, and he has continued. You can see even today the tweet which I've just read, that the countries in the region, they have really made it clear, and I think we need to applaud also that spirit that has been exhibited. We are not yet there to the extent, to the level where we want Africa to be, whereby we want to move in unison. We want to move as one block, but I think that the right steps have been taken. The leaders have tried and need to be commended, that this spirit that has been shown to Ethiopia, whereby the leaders have made it very clear that we cannot allow any foreigners in this our African continent to destabilize the region, to give advice on how we should solve these issues. President Uhuru Kenyatta, like we said, he made it very clear. President Museveni also made it very clear. President Kagame has repeatedly made it very clear that Africa can solve its issues. It doesn't really need any shepherding, or it doesn't need any supervision by anyone. We are grown men and women on this continent with enough intellectual firepower, with enough intellectual capability, to solve these problems. Most of our presidents, if you go and check them, have degrees and, in different fields. So when people like Blinken or Donald Trump go around, you see that they are equal. We are equal to them. So our leaders, I think they have demonstrated in this crisis, in this mutiny that is going on in Ethiopia, they have demonstrated the spirit of pan-Africanism, and this spirit, which has been demonstrated in support of Ethiopia by the regional countries, I think needs to be extended all the way to the Congo to solve the problem that has been there for the last 60 years. Congo has been under siege by some rebel groups, which they say that they are almost around 200 rebel groups in the eastern part of that country. And Africa has to come up and solve this problem. So the spirit that has been demonstrated in Ethiopia, and the solidarity that is also being demonstrated in standing up against the West in its boycott or its banning of Africans from traveling to Europe, that spirit, that solidarity should be demonstrated in solving all the African problems that are affecting the continent, whether it is the Sahel. France has to be put on notice that it cannot continue, operating on the continent and killing our people in Mali, Burkina Faso, and all these countries in Niger. France has been misbehaving all over here, killing our people, putting military boots on the ground in Ivory Coast, in Chad, Niger, Mali, all these countries, and the people are tired of France in these areas. So that spirit ought to be encouraged. It ought to be, told to the African leaders that we need this kind of spirit to continue. What you have demonstrated in Ethiopia in support of the government, democratically elected government of President, of the Prime Minister Abiy, needs to be extended to the other parts of Africa. And we need to start moving in unison, whether it is against coronavirus, whether it is asking for a seat at the United Nations Security Council, whether it is any conflict, whether it is any attack from foreigners. We need to move in unison. And we need to make it very clear that all of Africa, from Algeria, Morocco, all these countries belong to Africa. There's no Middle East. In the past, there has been some uncoordinated utterances, and Africa has been called the Middle East. In the northern part of Africa has been called Middle East. So we need to make it very clear, there's no Middle East in Africa. There's only Africa. There's one Africa, and we need to move in unison while we are solving our problems. So the Prime Minister has been really making all the right moves. And like Dr. Benjamin has said, we need to give him an award, because he has consulted the continent when there was a problem, and he has made it very clear from the beginning that African problems have to be solved in Africa. It is the African Union, and this trust, he injected a lot of trust in the African Union, and lo and behold, the African Union also was able to do something by appointing President Obasanjo, who was also able to stand up, and the fruits, and actually Ethiopia now is reaping the fruits of trusting Africa and not taking issues outside of Africa. So we see that other Africans have been able to stand up for Ethiopia. The Prime Minister now is reaping those fruits of trusting, the ability of Africans to solve their own problems. And he has made it clear from the beginning that Africa has to solve its own problems. This is the spirit of pan-Africanism, which we want to see. And like Dr. Benjamin has said, I think we need to reward the Prime Minister, and we need to continue to solve our problems in the same spirit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brother Gonza, and thank you very much, Dr. Benjamin Agnayagre. Really, that was a very good discussion. And so until next time, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much.